everybody, Backyard Bullion here. Guaranteeing the purity of your 999 silver is of course a critical importance for a lot of people, especially so if you produce your own poured silver for retail or even just for yourself as a hobby. You want to know, and your potential customers will want to know, that what you've got is indeed 999 pure silver. Now, for those of you who've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that we hallmark all of our poured silver, which means we send it off to the Edinburgh Assay Office, they test it, and they put a little mark on it to say that they have tested it and that they agree that it is 999 silver. I've talked about that quite a lot on my channel before, but what I've not talked about is some of the steps that I take prior to submission and some of the tips, hints and tricks that I employ when I am pouring my silver to recognise if things are not quite right, whether or not there's been a contamination, and to potentially avoid any issues when things get to the Edinburgh Assay Office, because it's so important. It is a responsibility. If you are hallmarking your silver, if you're sending things off, you don't just have a responsibility to the assay office to make sure that your stuff is right. You have a responsibility to yourself to ensure that things are correct, and also to your customers. It is so important. Now, we hallmark everything that we sell. There are very rare exceptions where we won't hallmark something, and really that is when it's going to fall into the category of just a piece of bullion. There are a few exemptions within the hallmarking legislation, but in general, we're talking like 1 in 1,000 pieces here. In general, we will hallmark everything that we sell, and it's such a critical thing. Now, one thing that I want to talk about here is that anybody can pour silver. There is absolutely nothing stopping anybody from going out, picking up some silver, getting a blowtorch, getting a crucible, getting a furnace and melting it, and hey presto, you have your own silver. What sets, I think, us and other UK pourers apart, where we do embrace the hallmarking and we do it en masse, so to speak, is that guarantee is there. There is nothing stopping anybody in this world from picking up some metal, pouring it, potentially adding a little bit of extra other metal into the mix to make up weight and so on. You see it fakes all the time, lead cores on big bars, things like that. So the assay testing is critical and of importance. But sometimes mistakes can happen whether or not you actively choose to make them or not. And we experienced something like that about a year ago. It was about 11 months ago, I think, actually, at this time last year. We were pouring a batch of items and we sent them off to the Edinburgh Assay Office, as I normally would do. And some of them failed. There was some iron filings, or like iron dust, on the top of some of the pieces. And here's an example of the kind of piece, what it looked like when it failed. And you can see there's this slight little discolouring here on the top of this piece. And that's the graphite dust that comes out from the crucible as it degrades when you're pouring it. And sometimes you get quite a thick layer of that graphite dust on some of these pieces. And before all of this had happened, we'd been sending pieces into the Edinburgh Assay Office without any issue, even with a little bit of graphite on them. I cleaned as much as I could off them, but in general, they were all going through just fine, so I didn't think anything of it. However, on this particular batch, it seemed like some iron, some rust particles, had found their way into the system. Now, whether that had come through from, I don't know, a graphite crucible that had some iron kind of filing dust in it from when it was made, or whether it was from my environment. I used to work with cast iron anvils and vices and things like that, and I had a little metal saw which potentially one of the little saw tooth could have broken off and been included into our silver. So you just don't know. I did not know where that came from. It was quite annoying, it was quite worrying, it was quite frustrating. Pieces had to be, of course, destroyed and remelted and sent off as scrap. They were not reused in any form for our poured silver. So it was quite an interesting time and a stressful time. And consequently from that, we went through a little bit of an evolution in how we work here with our silver and how we submit things. So you'll see that the vast majority of the pieces that we've got on the table here are just really clean, crisp, pure looking pieces. And we've taken definite steps to ensure the purity of our silver. And it can start from the very basic things. So the source that you use your silver, the source that you get to your silver from. Previously we would have the European Mint as our supplier, and that makes it sound like we're not using them anymore. We still use them as the primary supplier, but as well I would go out and I would buy milky second-hand coins, which sometimes were older, generic rounds from the 70s, 80s, 90s, bars, things like that. Now, back then, you cannot really test and guarantee those, and there's no guarantee that there aren't little other particles in there. A 999 stamped bar from the 1980s in America could well actually just be 998 silver or 997 silver. You just don't know. So an assay mark really is the only kind of junk silver that I would pour down if there was any out there that has already been assayed. So we now steer clear of that kind of silver, and we will now exclusively use silver casting grain, and you can see the difference, the absolute glorious nature that comes out from these. In addition, there's loads of extra steps that we take, and I think they're really important as well. When pieces come out and they do have little bits of graphite on here, we will soak them in vinegar, strong acid vinegar, for a long time to get rid of the majority of this, and then we will go over things with very fine sandpaper. I have it here, wet and dry sandpaper, get it nice and wet, and then go over these things. It takes off these top layers of the graphite, which might have the odd little bit of iron filings in there. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, that seems like quite a harsh thing to fail a piece of silver on if it's just got minute specks of iron on the top. And what I think is really interesting is the physics of this kind of thing, and it will be of help to anybody out there who is a pourer of silver, that you can identify when things are not quite right. So silver is a very dense metal, and there's not a lot of other metals out there that are commonplace that are more dense than silver. So you've got other common metals like copper, iron, brass, all of these others. They are less dense than silver. So in liquid forms, they will float on top of silver, which is really, really interesting. So if you are pouring your silver and you've poured something out and there's this little kind of, I don't know if it will show you on, it depends on the metal I suppose, but lead for example, or it will probably conglomerate on the top of the bar in a little spot and you'll be able to see it there. There are these telltale signs that you can identify if you do that, and especially with the sort of iron filings as well, you can really see where these will appear on the bars. Now, if that happens, and I have noticed, and I haven't had any failures since that one small little batch that we have, probably partly due to the processes that we've implemented now, but I haven't had any failures since then, and that's, I think, partly down to a secondary process which we put all of our silver through. And that process is what is called a sonic bath. Sounds very fancy, I know, but basically, in a nutshell, I have to move a few pieces out of the way here, ensure that there's a little guard for these spheres because they roll around like crazy. So, in a nutshell, a sonic bath is an ultrasonic waves of energy that are pounding against the silver in water, and it will knock off any surface particles. So the physics of it, as I was explained by the assay office when I was going through these little issues, was that in a nutshell, the particles of iron filings will not be bonded to the silver. That's a really important thing to understand. They will actually just be sitting on top sometimes, and they won't be part of the metal alloy, so to speak. So they said, and they did a few tests on some of the ones that I had up there, that a sonic bath actually cleaned off all of these microscopic particles of detritus and little things that were on there. So what we now do, and these little machines are not really very expensive at all. You can get really big ones which are really expensive, but you can get these small ones here for about 40-50 pounds, and they do the trick, because I've not had any failures since all of that, and it works on small bars, big bars, all alike. Of course, when you've got a giant piece like this big kilo cube over here that we'll want to stick in here, we kind of have to do it. It doesn't quite fix that big bar. You'll have to do it in sort of multiple stages because it won't all submerge underneath one thing. But anyway, so basically this pounds the silver with lots of tiny little microscopic bubbles, and that will take off all of the little bits of detritus. It's just a little extra step that we go through, and it's a really very interesting concept. So big thank you to the Edinburgh Assay office. You see there's a fancy space age blue light that turns on when you're in there, but basically you just set it and you leave it. The lid doesn't have to be closed, but it does help. So you probably not see it, but there's like all these tiny little microscopic vibrations happening within the water, and that will take off any sort of layers of detritus, any really dirty things. You tend to see these used quite a lot for cleaning jewellery. So like my little wedding ring there, we just put that in. It will just kind of pound and clean off all the dirt and grime and everything. So lots of really kind of interesting scientific properties going on in this process which clean the silver, which is fascinating. Now I'm just going to turn that off because that noise is rather annoying, I have to say, especially when you're trying to do a video. So we'll just put that to one side for the time being. So we do that for every single piece, and that's what we have been doing for this last couple of, well, it's a couple of years, a year now, we've been basically, every piece we make, we inspect thoroughly. So every tiny little Tetris piece you see here, close to 200 here on the table, we'll inspect every single one for tiny little imperfections and marks. So you'll see on this one here, this is pre-cleaned, so there's this tiny little graphite schmutz there. It comes off very easily with a piece of sandpaper, so if you just get a little piece of sandpaper going, get a little bit of water on it as well. Every single piece gets a good clean first with the sandpaper, and you can see just after a few seconds, go on camera focus, after a few seconds that graphite has gone, but just to ensure that there's no other residual particles that have come onto this silver either during the melting process or just during the settling process in the house, we'll then put it in that ultrasonic bath. So plenty of work that goes into these pieces post-pour, pre-assay. And what I really like, and I haven't shown before as well, is the assay submission process too is really interesting. So the assay process it's a legal thing. It's not just, oh, you send it in and they do it. If you know, we are regulated in some sense by this. We're regulated by the population. You know, the hallmarking side of things is such an important thing. And if you ever do find or buy pieces of jewelry that don't have a hallmark, there's this thing right at the bottom of this little hallmark card that I have. What should you do if your item is not hallmarked? If you have a concern regarding hallmarking, trading standards, you know, we regulate ourselves, but at the same time our customer base needs to be educated, needs to understand that hallmarking is critical and is important, even for poured silver. And it's something that a lot of hobbyists might think doesn't apply to them, but ultimately the question always comes down to whether you want to skirt the legislation, find the loophole. So in the legislation there are, I don't think it says it on here, but there are exemptions from for things. It's exemption weight. So if things are below a certain weight threshold, you're looking for anything less than a gram in gold doesn't need to be hallmarked, but a gram of gold is tiny. So 7.78 grams of silver. So there are exemptions for sure, but at the same time, and things like exemptions for bullion as well, as I explained earlier. But I don't really want to skirt with that law. I mean, if you get reported trading standards by somebody because you're selling, I don't know, like stars, for example, this for me just would not constitute a piece of bullion, and it would not for trading standards either. It's an art piece. It's something with a different shape. Yes, it's made of 999 silver, and you can argue that is bullion, but ultimately, do you really want to go through that legal process of being challenged by trading standards? I mean, defending yourself in court or something? No, you don't. So for us here in the United Kingdom, the law means that we really do embrace this, and I think it adds so much value beyond that. It can be seen as quite this burden and this responsibility, especially so if you're just a hobbyist. And I know it's expensive for a lot of people to even get registered, but if you are keen to go forward in the United Kingdom with this kind of thing, it is so important. It is so important. I can't stress quite how important it is. So you get this kind of, well, this is all digitalized now as well. I've just printed this off from their Edinburgh Assay Office website, but you do have to do a form. It's almost sort of a form of contract with terms and conditions on the back as well. You have to submit things, and you cannot then subsequently sell things which fail and so on. So it's and when we did get that failure last year, you get this formal kind of intention of failure response from the Edinburgh Assay Office, a formal legal document that says that you understand that the items that you have had go through have failed and that you can't retell them and so on. So it's really, really important. It's not just a thing that we have to do, it's a thing that is a legal requirement that is adding value to our stuff. And the reason why we do this is to guarantee the purity of our silver, because any Tom, Dick or Harry can go out and buy some silver, buy a furnace, buy a crucible, buy a blowtorch and pour some silver. It's very easy to do, and one day I might even do a kind of beginner's series on pouring silver, Backyard Bullion's beginner's guide to silver pouring. It is not a difficult thing to do. The difficult thing is getting it to A, look good, B, sellable, have it actually marketable and enjoyable for people, and all of the other things, and the purity and the guarantees of that. That's the last thing that is of most importance for people. So lots to factor in. So it's a lot more than just pouring a piece of silver, sending it off, having it done. And I mean, I haven't even sort of talked about the process of which we send it off as well. So beyond the cleaning and the sonic bathing of all of our pieces, we then will obviously need to tell the assay office where we need to hallmark everything. Now for Tetris pieces and things en masse like this, we don't have to individually mark each piece, but for the bigger pieces where we want to tell the assay office exactly where we do it, just a Sharpie pen to show where we want to go is probably the easiest thing that we do. I'm just going to take that off because this is actually going to need to have a laser hallmark for the big chunky kilo plus cube, the year of the monkey business, because that's the year that we're living in right now. So there's lots to factor in for hallmarking, and I hope that all gives you a little bit of insight as to the steps that we take here to ensure the purity and quality of our stuff. It really isn't just pour it, assay it, send it off, sell it, make a profit. There's a lot of labour, of love that goes into each and every single piece, and I can only tell you quite how long it takes to individually check, clean, and sonic bathe, and then package up, send up, assay, return, stamp. The pouring is actually probably, I'd say, about maybe 10% of the time taken to actually manufacture these. So yeah, it's an interesting process, and one which I hope that you guys have gleaned a little bit of information from and enjoyed. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section about assay testing. If you've got any questions about the process or anything that you are not sure on from what I've said today. I hope this video has been of use to anybody who might be thinking about pouring their own silver if you're in the UK or not. And for those of you who are perhaps out of the UK and don't really know quite what we're talking about, perhaps in the US, hallmarking is different. It is very special, and it's what sets, I think, us and all the other UK silver pourers that embrace hallmarking and do it en masse. It really does, make a difference, I think. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you, and especially if you're a BYB Rambling Society member watching all the way to the end of this video. Otherwise, that's it from us today. Thank you one and all for watching. We'll see you on the next video next weekend. We're going to be doing a live stream. I know, a backyard bullion rarity. So we'll see you there. Have a great time, and thanks for watching. Please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.